My name is Clara. I'm 32 years old, and my husband Mark says I have hands that can make ordinary things magical. But for the last decade, the only magic I've performed is making my family's problems disappear. I wore the title of the responsible one, like a heavy cloak, believing it was my duty. 10 years ago, on my 10th wedding anniversary, my parents tried to force me to cancel my special dinner to babysit. That was the final straw. But what they didn't know was that when they left their old leather bag by my front door, my husband picked it up, and what he found inside made him scream in horror, exposing a lie that had ruined my entire life. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Before I tell you about the lie that shaped my entire adulthood, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family boundaries and the power of reclaiming your own life. Before that fateful day, my life was a series of sacrifices disguised as family love. I lived with my wonderful husband, Mark, in a small, charming house in the suburbs. He's a software engineer, logical and steady as a rock. I worked part-time at a local art gallery, a job that paid the bills and scratched the artistic itch, but always left me feeling like a ghost of the person I was supposed to become. 14 years ago, I was at a crossroads. I held the acceptance letter from the Pratt Institute in my hands. It was on heavy, cream-colored paper with an embossed seal, and it felt like the entire world. It was a full scholarship to their fine arts program in New York, my biggest dream. I could already smell the oil paint and turpentine, feel the creative energy of the city calling my name. But just a week before I was set to leave, my parents called a family meeting. My father, Richard, sat me down with a grave expression, announcing that a bad investment had wiped out nearly their entire life savings. My mother, Susan, sat beside him, weeping into a handkerchief. "We might lose the house, Clara," she sobbed. "Everything we've worked for." And then their eyes fell on me. My younger sister, Chloe, who was 16 at the time, just sat there biting her nails, looking more bored than concerned by the adult drama. "Clara," my father began, his voice laced with a practiced anguish I would only recognize in hindsight. "You know, we would never ask this of you, but we need you to stay, just for a few years, until I can get back on my feet. You could get a job, help out around here," my mother added. "Think of it as a detour, sweetheart, not a dead end." My dream shattered. Pratt, New York, the life of an artist. It all evaporated. But how could I say no, watching my parents fall apart like that? I stayed. I gave up the scholarship. I got a job as a waitress, then as an office assistant, giving them nearly every paycheck. That was the beginning of a pattern that would last for over a decade. I became the responsible one, dependable Clara. Meanwhile, Chloe, the golden child, was shielded from all the hardship. The money I earned helped pay for Chloe's private tutors, her first car, and later her tuition at an expensive private university that she eventually dropped out of. It was an investment in her future, they always said. What about my future? It was indefinitely on hold. This injustice seeped into every aspect of our lives. I remember when Mark and I got engaged, my parents' first reaction wasn't joy. My mother pulled me into the kitchen, her voice a worried whisper. "Clara, this is wonderful, but will you still be able to help the family? Does Mark understand your responsibilities?" They didn't see a happy daughter who had found love. They saw an asset that was at risk of being reallocated. They even suggested we have a tiny, simple wedding, so the money we saved could go toward a safer new car for Chloe. Mark was stunned, but I, so used to it, just smiled and said we'd handle it ourselves. Another time, when I was 25, I'd managed to save up $2,000 for a trip to Italy, a desperate little attempt to reclaim my lost artistic inspiration. I had a whole itinerary planned: the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the Borghese in Rome. A week before my flight, Chloe called me, crying. She had broken her new laptop and needed to replace it immediately for a midterm exam. My parents pressured me. "You can go to Italy anytime, Clara. Your sister's education is what's important." I gave her the money. I later found out she used it for a weekend trip to Miami with her friends. When I confronted them, my parents just said I needed to be more understanding and that I was always too hard on Chloe. Mark came into my life like a breath of fresh air. He saw me, the real me, not the role my family had assigned me. He saw the sketchbooks I kept hidden under my bed and encouraged me to draw again. He was the only person who ever asked about the dreams I'd given up. When we got married, I hoped things would change. I had my own family now, but they didn't. My parents simply expanded the definition of my duties. Now, Mark and I were the ones expected to help out whenever Chloe was in a bind, from covering the security deposit on her apartment to paying off a credit card bill she'd accidentally forgotten. Mark tried to set boundaries. "They're taking advantage of you, Clara," he would say gently. But I was so tangled in a web of guilt and obligation that I didn't know how to get out. My parents had suffered so much after that financial hit, I told myself. I owed them this. They needed me. At least, that's what I believed. I lived that lie for 14 years. I built my life on its foundation, a foundation far weaker and more rotten than I could have ever imagined. I had no idea that foundation was about to crumble, and the truth buried beneath was far more devastating than any sacrifice I had ever made. The catalyst for the collapse began, as it often does, with good news at least, for my family. A year ago, Chloe announced she was pregnant. My parents were ecstatic. Their first grandchild. The family's entire focus, which was already centered on Chloe, was now magnified to an entirely new level. My parents' house became a shrine to the unborn baby. The living room was filled with expensive baby gear that Chloe had merely glanced at in a catalog. I tried to be happy for her, I really did. But a persistent, quiet grief gnawed at me. Mark and I had been trying for a child for a few years without success. We had been through the painful months of hope and disappointment, the silent doctor's appointments, and the private tears. We had eventually made the decision to stop trying and embrace our happy life as a duo. But Chloe's easy pregnancy felt like a painful reminder of what we couldn't have. Mark would notice me staring into space and just quietly take my hand. My guilt over this envy only made me try harder to be supportive. I pushed my feelings aside. I threw her a baby shower, bought the most expensive gifts on her registry, and listened to her complain for hours about morning sickness. When baby Leo was born, I was there. I watched him so Chloe could get some rest, which usually meant going shopping or out to lunch with friends. I became the free, on-call babysitter. Mark grew increasingly concerned. "You're running yourself into the ground," he said one evening when I came home, after a 12-hour shift of watching Leo so Chloe could get a manicure. "They don't even say thank you. They're just overwhelmed." I'd reply weakly, repeating the excuse I'd told myself 100 times. The real event, the true storm, began to form around a date that was incredibly important to Mark and me, our 10th wedding anniversary. It was a huge milestone. 10 years with the man who saw me when I felt invisible. Mark had been planning something special. He'd made reservations at an exclusive restaurant we had always dreamed of visiting, and had secretly bought me a professional-grade easel and a full set of oil paints, the most thoughtful gift I'd ever received. When I unwrapped it, I traced the smooth wood of the easel, the smell of fresh canvas filling my senses. "It's time for you to start again. For real," he said. I cried. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope that the artist inside me wasn't dead. I spent the week looking forward to that evening. It wasn't just an anniversary dinner. It was a symbol of a new beginning. Then, 3 days before our anniversary, the phone rang. It was Chloe. "Clara," she chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet. "You are not going to believe this. My husband, Kevin, just surprised me with a weekend trip to a spa resort for a postpartum reset. Isn't that amazing?" My heart began to beat faster. I had a terrible feeling. "That sounds wonderful, Chloe," I said cautiously. "Yeah, and it's this weekend," she continued, completely ignoring my silence. "So, I'm going to need you to watch Leo from Friday night until Sunday morning. Mom and Dad said they'd stop by to help, but, they're getting older. I really need you to be there." The air was sucked from my lungs. "Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This Saturday is my 10th wedding anniversary. Mark and I have plans." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh," she said, the sweetness gone, replaced by an icy edge. "Well, I'm sure you can reschedule. This is important." I really need a break. You have no idea how exhausting it is to be a mother. Anger, hot and unfamiliar, surged through me. I do, Chloe. I've been there. I've watched your son countless times. But my anniversary is not negotiable. You're being so selfish, she snapped and hung up. Minutes later, my phone rang again. It was my mother. The storm had officially made landfall. I thought I was ready for it, but I had no idea how strong this hurricane would be, or how it would tear away everything I thought I knew about my family. My mother's phone call started with a tone of manipulative sweetness. "Clara, honey, I just spoke with Chloe. She's so upset. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Mom," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "I told Chloe that Saturday is our 10th anniversary. We're not canceling." "Oh, darling, don't be so dramatic," my mother chuckled, as if I were a pouting child. "It's just a dinner. You and Mark can go out next week. Family helps family. Your sister really needs you, don't you understand? She's on the verge of burnout." "I have helped," I said, listing the most recent times I'd had to drop my own work or personal plans to watch Leo. "I love being an aunt, but I have a life of my own, too." My mother's voice turned cold. "A life of your own? Clara, don't forget that if it weren't for the sacrifices this entire family made, including you, we wouldn't be where we are today. Your father worked so hard to rebuild everything. The least you can do is show a little gratitude and help out when you're asked." There it was, the guilt card. They had played it so effectively for so long that it was like a conditioned reflex in me. But this time, with Mark's support and the gift of that easel sitting in my studio, something felt different. "My gratitude doesn't mean I have to erase the important moments in my own life," I said. "My answer is no." I hung up before she could say another word, my heart hammering in my chest. I felt both terrified and exhilarated. It was the first time I had ever truly said no without immediately apologizing. But they didn't give up. The escalation was swift and ruthless. The first incident was the call from my father later that evening. He didn't mince words. "Clara, your mother tells me you're being incredibly selfish. I'm very disappointed. After everything we've done for you, giving you a roof over your head when you needed it." "Dad, I haven't lived with you since I was 18, I interrupted, "and I paid you rent until the day I moved out." "And what about my help over the years? Does that count for nothing?" "That's called family responsibility," he growled. "Chloe needs you. Period. I expect you to reconsider your decision and do the right thing. Don't make us think you've forgotten your place." "My place?" I repeated, stunned by his choice of words. "And what place is that, Dad? The daughter who's always there to clean up the messes?" He was silent, and his silence was worse than any lecture. Next came Chloe. She started posting passive-aggressive statuses on social media. "So sad when you realize some family members don't actually care about your well-being," one post read, accompanied by a photo of her looking tired while holding baby Leo. Friends and relatives began to comment, "Sending hugs, and let us know if you need anything." I knew exactly who she was targeting. It was a public smear campaign. She posted another story. "Wish I could be selfish and go out to dinner instead of taking care of my sweet baby number mom life." A clueless cousin commented, "You're a supermom, Chloe." Some people just don't get it. It was mortifying. The third, and perhaps most hurtful, incident happened the next day. I got an email from my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister. "Dear Clara," it began, "your mother called me. She's so worried. I know you and Mark are looking forward to your anniversary, but Chloe is really struggling. Being a single mom is so hard." "A single mom?" "Kevin, Chloe's husband, was going on the spa trip with her. They were twisting the narrative to paint me as a heartless monster who was refusing to help a struggling, single young mother." My blood boiled. They weren't just manipulating me, they were actively lying to our entire family. Mark was my rock through it all. He read the texts, he listened to the phone calls, and the fury in his eyes mirrored my own. "This isn't about babysitting anymore, Clara," he said as we sat in the kitchen that night. "This is about control. They can't stand that you have something that's just yours, something they can't dictate." He was right. Our anniversary dinner had become the battlefield for my independence. The final wake-up call came from my best friend, Sarah. I had called her in a state of desperation, pouring out the whole story. Sarah knew my family's history better than anyone. She listened patiently before saying something that sent a chill down my spine. "Clara," she said gently, "they aren't asking, they're demanding. And have you ever noticed something strange? Your parents lost all their savings 14 years ago. But Chloe lives a pretty comfortable life, doesn't she? The new car, the vacations, that apartment. Where does that come from if your parents are still struggling?" Her question hung in the air. I had never truly put the pieces together. I was always so busy working and sacrificing that I never stopped to analyze it logically. How could my supposedly broke family afford to fund Chloe's lifestyle so lavishly? I'd always just assumed my dad had successfully rebuilt his business, but it never quite added up. A deep unease began to settle in. "I don't know, Sarah," I whispered. "I think it's time you found out," she replied. "Because I have a feeling there's a lot more to this story than who's watching baby Leo on Saturday night." That conversation planted a seed of doubt. My anger began to give way to a profound sense of dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the truth was at the bottom. I just didn't know I was about to be pushed, and the fall would change everything. Saturday morning, our anniversary. I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I'd turned my phone off the night before, after a final barrage of guilt-laden texts from my mother. Mark made breakfast, an attempt to bring a sense of normalcy to a day that was supposed to be special. We were sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee, trying to focus on our evening ahead, when the doorbell rang, sharp and demanding. Mark and I looked at each other. My heart sank. "Don't answer it," he said. But then came the pounding, loud and insistent. "Clara! Mark! Open the door! We know you're in there!" My father's voice boomed through the door. With a heavy sigh, Mark went to open it, and there, on our doorstep, was my worst-case scenario. My parents. Behind them stood Chloe, wearing sunglasses to hide eyes that were probably faking exhaustion. And in her arms was baby Leo, along with a massive diaper bag, a stroller, and a travel crib. They hadn't just come to argue, they had come to stay. "We need to talk," my father said, pushing past Mark into the house without an invitation. My mother and Chloe followed, carrying the baby paraphernalia like an invading army. "There's nothing to talk about," Mark said, his body language a wall at the entrance. "We've been clear. Tonight is our anniversary." My mother ignored him. "Clara," she said, turning to me, her eyes filled with calculated disappointment. "We are not going to argue about this. Your father and I have discussed it. This trip is essential for Chloe's mental health. You will watch, Leo. We are staying here to help you." The way she said the word help made it sound like a threat. "Stay here?" I stammered. "You can't just... This is our home." "Don't be ridiculous," Chloe chimed in, setting Leo down on a playmat she'd just unfurled from a bag. "It's just for one night. You're going out to dinner anyway, right? We just need a place to sleep." The audacity was breathtaking. They had made an executive decision to commandeer my house and turn my anniversary into a mandatory babysitting session. That's when it happened. The final straw. Mark, my patient, level-headed husband, finally snapped. "No," he said, his voice low and powerful. "None of you are staying here. You have ignored Clara's wishes, manipulated her, and now you show up on our doorstep expecting to be welcomed? Get out." My father turned to face Mark. "You have no right to tell us what to do in this family, young man." "This is my family," Mark growled, gesturing between me and himself. "And you are poisoning it!" In the middle of the chaos, my mother set her large leather handbag on the floor next to the sofa. "Richard, don't," she said, but there was a smirk on her face. They knew they had me cornered. They thought that, as always, I would fold under the pressure. And then my father said the words that broke everything inside me. He looked directly at me, ignoring Mark as if he didn't exist. "Clara, listen. Your anniversary dinner is just a meal. It can wait. Family can't. You owe us this for the years we struggled. It's time you paid a little back. You will do the right thing, or you will regret turning your back on the people who sacrificed everything for you." Sacrificed everything for me? The blatant lie was so shocking it took my breath away. My entire adult life had been a sacrifice for them. My abandoned dream, my money, my time, it was all invisible to them. To them, it was a debt I owed. The sound of something shattering inside me was almost audible. In that moment, a cold clarity washed over me. The web of lies and manipulation they had spun around me for years became starkly visible. I wasn't a loved family member. I was a resource, a tool, and they would never, ever stop. "Okay," I said, my voice small but firm. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at me, my parents looking triumphant. "Let me just go get a few things." I turned and walked away. Not towards the bedroom, but towards my studio, where my new easel stood like a promise. I knew I had to leave, not just for the evening, but leave for good from this toxic dynamic. But I had no idea that my moment of decision wasn't the only one about to happen. An even bigger truth was lying dormant in a leather bag on my living room floor, just waiting to be discovered. As I walked into my studio, my plan was simple. Grab my purse and car keys and get out of there with Mark. We could check into a hotel, anywhere to escape the madness. But when I returned to the living room, the scene I walked into stopped me in my tracks. In the heat of the argument, Chloe had tripped over my mother's handbag, sending it spilling across the floor. The usual contents rolled out: a wallet, keys, lipstick. But there was something else. A thick, stapled packet of documents had slid out from an inner pocket. Mark, with his quick reflexes, bent down to help gather the items. My mother let out a strange, strangled cry. "Don't! I'll get it!" But it was too late. Mark had already picked up the packet. His eyes scanned the first page. I watched as the color drained from his face. His breathing changed. His knuckles, gripping the papers, turned white. And then, he froze. His face went from confusion to disbelief, then paled with a cold fury I had never seen before. "Mark?" I asked, walking closer. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He just looked up, his eyes locked on my father. He wasn't screaming with his voice, but his entire body was screaming. He held up the packet, his hand shaking with rage. "What is this?" he hissed. "Give me that!" My father lunged. But Mark stepped back, shielding the papers with his body. "Clara," Mark said, his voice hoarse, "you need to see this." He handed me the documents. The first page was an investment account statement. The name on it was the Wilson Family Trust, my family's name. The date was from 14 years ago, just after I'd given up my scholarship. And the number at the bottom, it wasn't a negative number. It was a massive positive. It showed a net profit of nearly $500,000. I flipped through the pages. There were more statements, year after year, showing the portfolio growing steadily. There were wire transfer receipts, tens of thousands of dollars being moved into Chloe's personal account. There was a copy of a deed for a vacation condo in Florida, in my parents' names, purchased 7 years ago. The entire bad investment story was a lie. There was no crisis. In fact, it had been a wildly successful investment. They had taken money, probably an inheritance or their life savings, and multiplied it several times over. The lie wasn't just to hide their wealth. It was specifically designed to keep me home, to turn me into their cash cow, my sacrifice, my broken dream. It was all built on a calculated, cruel deception. I felt sick. The room started to spin. I had to grab Mark's arm to keep myself from falling. "Clara, we can explain," my mother stammered, her face as white as a sheet. "Explain?" I whispered. "Explain what? That you lied to me for 14 years? That you destroyed my future so I could stay home and pay for Chloe's little luxuries? That's not we wanted to protect you," my father tried. "The world is a tough place. We wanted you close to home. And the money, it was to secure Chloe's future. She's not strong like you are." "Protect her?" Mark's voice cut through the air, sharp and brutal. "You stole her future to buy Chloe a convertible and yourselves a condo in Florida. That's not protection. That's theft." That weak, pathetic excuse was all I needed to hear. There was no remorse, only self-preservation. Mark put a hand on my shoulder, steady and protective. The rage was gone from his face. It had been replaced by a plan. "Richard, Susan," he said. his voice dangerously calm. "I think you should all sit down. Because this conversation just changed completely. My plan to leave was gone. A new one, forged from the brutal truth, took its place. This was no longer about escaping an argument. This was about taking my life back. "Mom," I said, looking her straight in the eye, my voice no longer shaking. "I think you were right. We do need to talk. Right now. And you're going to want to hear what I have to say." The secret weapon had been revealed. It wasn't one I had prepared, but one their own carelessness had delivered into my hands. But now it was mine, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. The game had changed, and for the first time in my life, I was holding all the cards. "Sit down," I commanded, my voice cold and foreign even to my own ears. To my surprise, they obeyed. My parents sank onto the sofa, looking small and guilty. Chloe, who had never faced a real consequence in her life, stood frozen in the middle of the room, her eyes darting between them and me, confusion and fear warring on her face. She looked to her parents to save her, but they offered nothing. Mark stood beside me, a silent, powerful presence. He placed the folder on the coffee table, between us and them, like an undetonated bomb. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm that comes from having nothing left to lose. They had already taken my past. They would not take my future. For the first time, my voice didn't shake. "Let's start at the beginning," I said, picking up the first statement. 14 years ago, you told me you lost your savings in a bad investment. This document tells a different story. It shows a profit of nearly $500,000. So, what, exactly, was the bad investment? My father couldn't meet my eyes. He mumbled something about market risks and initial uncertainty. "Don't." I cut him off. "Don't lie to me anymore. I've lived with your lies long enough." "The truth, Dad." I fell silent. My mother started to cry. "We just wanted what was best for our girls," she whimpered. "Best for who?" Mark interjected, his voice sharp as a razor. "Because it looks like you sacrificed one daughter's future to bankroll the other's lifestyle." He flipped to a page with a wire transfer receipt. $20,000 into Chloe's account in June of 2015. Was that for her new car? The one Clara had to work overtime to help pay the insurance on? He flipped another page. And this one? A $5,000 transfer, dated the same week Clara had to delay a dental procedure because she couldn't afford it. Was that for Chloe's girls' trip to Vegas? Chloe took a step back, as if she'd been slapped. "I didn't know," she started. "Oh, you knew," I said, turning on her. "You might not have known the details, but you always knew there was an endless supply of money for you, while I had to scratch and save for every single thing. You never asked where it came from because you didn't care. As long as you got what you wanted," I continued, page by damning page, laying out the narrative of their deceit. The Florida condo. You told me a friend was letting you borrow it. Chloe's luxury vacations. You said it was a bonus from Kevin's job, her ability to drop out of college with zero debt. You said the school refunded the tuition. Every excuse, every cover-up, every manipulation for the past 14 years was laid bare in the harsh light of the truth. The picture they had painted of a struggling family, pulling together to overcome adversity, melted away, revealing the ugly reality. A calculated scheme to exploit one child and indulge the other. Finally, I put the folder down. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why do this to me?" My father finally looked up, his eyes red. "Because you're strong, Clara," he said, his voice thick. "You always have been. You could take care of yourself. Chloe is different. She's more fragile. She needed us." It was the worst justification of all. They had punished me for my strength. They had shackled me for my competence. They had seen my kindness as a weakness to be exploited. "She's not fragile," I said. "She's enabled. You created a 30-year-old woman who is incapable of taking responsibility for her own life. And you did it by stealing mine." I stood up. It was time to end this. "Here is what's going to happen," I announced, my voice leaving no room for argument. "As of today, the Bank of Clara is officially closed. There will be no more money. There will be no more last-minute babysitting. There will be no more dropping my plans to solve your manufactured crises. I turned to Chloe. You're on your own. Welcome to adulthood. Then I turned back to my parents. I am going to need time. A lot of time. To process this betrayal. I don't know if our relationship can be salvaged, but if it can, it will be on entirely new terms. Terms of truth and respect. Things I have never, ever received from you. You can't do this, my mother cried. We're family. A family isn't built on lies, Mark said, putting a protective arm around my waist. Clara has given you too many chances. They're gone now. I think it's time for you to go. They looked at us, shocked and defeated. For the first time, their words had no effect. Their manipulations had lost their power. They had completely lost control. My father stood slowly, looking like he'd aged 100 years. He didn't say a word. My mother and Chloe gathered the baby's things in a stunned silence, avoiding our gaze. As they got to the door, my mother turned back, her face streaked with tears. We love you, Clara. I used to think so too, I replied quietly, and then they were gone. The door closed behind them, leaving a ringing silence. I stood there, in my living room, next to my husband, and for the first time in 14 years, I felt free. The anniversary dinner was canceled, but we were celebrating something far more important. My liberation. The silence my family left behind wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like the calm after a violent storm. Mark and I stood there for a long time, just breathing. The air in the house felt lighter, cleaner. I'm sorry, Mark finally said, turning to pull me into a hug. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. How could you have? I whispered into his chest. I didn't even see it. I was living right in the middle of it. We held each other, and I felt the tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders for 14 years begin to dissolve. That night, we didn't go to the fancy restaurant. Instead, Mark ordered pizza, our comfort food, and we opened a bottle of champagne. We sat on the living room floor, surrounded by unopened anniversary gifts, and we talked. We talked about the past, about all the red flags I had ignored. And for the first time, we talked about the future, a future that was truly ours, unburdened by false obligations. So, what about Pratt? Mark asked gently. My heart skipped a beat. Mark, I'm 32 years old. So what? He said, taking my hand. Your talent doesn't have an expiration date. Neither do your dreams. We can make this work, Clara. We actually can now. Later that night, long after Mark was asleep, I went into my studio. I stared at the brand new easel and the set of oil paints. With a trembling hand, I opened a tube of cerulean blue. I squeezed a small amount onto the palette. The rich, sharp smell of the oil paint filled the room, and it smelled like hope. It smelled like coming home. I painted for hours, not trying to create a masterpiece, but just letting the chaotic emotions flow onto the canvas. It was a mess of color and texture, and it was the most honest thing I had created in years. The next few days were strange. My phone was unnervingly quiet. No frantic calls from Chloe, no guilt-tripping texts from my mother. Their absence felt like a void, but not an empty one. It was space. Space to breathe. The initial fate of my family came to me through my Aunt Carol, who called a few days later, her voice laced with concern. Clara, what is going on? Your parents look just awful, and Chloe is in tears, saying you've disowned them. I told her the truth, a condensed but honest version. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Oh, Clara, she finally said, her voice full of shock and sorrow. I had no idea. None of us did. We all just went along with the story. I feel awful. I am so sorry. She told me that Chloe had been forced to cancel her spa trip, having no one to watch her son. She and Kevin had gotten into a massive fight about money. It turned out, Kevin had no idea about the secret parental funding. He thought Chloe was just very good with a budget. The crumbling lie was causing cracks in their own relationship. My parents, meanwhile, were facing a new reality. Without me as their buffer and problem solver, they were forced to deal with Chloe's irresponsibility firsthand. Aunt Carol said they looked exhausted. As for me, I felt like I was coming back to life. I spent hours researching art programs. I contacted the admissions office at Pratt just to inquire. I started painting again, hesitantly at first, and then with a fierce passion I hadn't felt in years. Every brushstroke felt like an act of reclamation. A week after the confrontation, Mark and I went to that restaurant. We had our belated anniversary dinner. As we raised our glasses, Mark said, "To 10 years, and to the first day of the rest of your life." I smiled. A real, genuine smile for the first time in what felt like forever. My new dawn had arrived, and the sky looked brilliant. 10 months later, I was standing in an art studio in Brooklyn, New York. The afternoon sun streamed through the large industrial windows, illuminating the dancing dust motes in the air and casting a brilliant glow on the canvas in front of me. The air was thick with the smell of oil paint and turpentine, the scent I had dreamed of for so long. I was no longer a part-time gallery assistant. I was a student at the Pratt Institute. Getting accepted at 32 had been a small miracle. I had submitted a portfolio of my old work and the new paintings I'd created with a frantic urgency after that anniversary night. They saw something in me, a voice that had been silenced for too long. Mark had arranged his job so he could work remotely most of the time, and we rented a small but sunny apartment in Park Slope. Life was chaotic, challenging, and utterly wonderful. I was living the dream my family had stolen, and it was sweeter than I had ever imagined. The city's energy fueled me, and for the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, the language of color, form, and emotion. Justice, I've learned, comes in many forms. For me, it wasn't about revenge. It was my own success and happiness. It was proving to myself and the world that I wasn't strong Clara who could be used, but strong Clara who could rebuild her own life from the ashes. My work reflected that. It was bold, emotional, and told a story of rebirth. One of my professors called it brutally honest. I took it as a compliment. Meanwhile, back home, a more natural form of justice had found my family. Without my financial and emotional support, their perfect bubble had burst. Aunt Carol still gave me occasional updates. My parents had been forced to sell the Florida condo to cover losses from funding Chloe's lifestyle. They were facing the reality of a retirement with far less money than they had planned, a direct consequence of their own poor financial management and enablement. Chloe and Kevin's relationship didn't survive the truth. When Kevin discovered the extent of Chloe's debt and financial dependence, he left. Chloe, for the first time in her life, was a truly single mother. She had to sell her expensive car, move into a smaller apartment, and get a full-time job. According to Aunt Carol, she was struggling immensely. She was so used to having a safety net. Now, she was learning to walk the tightrope alone. My parents tried to get in touch a few times. At first, it was angry emails, accusing me of destroying the family. I didn't respond. Then, the tone shifted to pleading, begging me to come home and talk. I only responded once, 6 months after I moved. I wrote a short, simple letter. "Dear Mom and Dad, I have received your emails. I am living in New York and attending Pratt. I am happy. I hope that one day you can understand the depth of the hurt your actions caused. But I cannot be the one to fix this for you. My own healing has to be my priority right now. Maybe someday in the future we can talk, but not now. Your daughter, Clara." My mother called me after she got the letter, weeping. She said she was proud of me, but that she missed me terribly. She apologized, a real apology, for the first time. "I was wrong, Clara. I was so blind. I just wanted Chloe to be okay that I didn't see I was making you not okay." It was a start. I thanked her for the apology, but I maintained my distance. My new boundaries weren't walls to punish them. They were fences to protect my peace. Our relationship, if it was ever to be rebuilt, would require time and evidence of real change, not just words. One evening, as Mark and I were walking through Prospect Park, I told him about the call with my mom. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" he asked. I watched the autumn leaves fall, each one its own world of color. "I think I'm in the process of it," I said. "But my forgiveness doesn't look like erasing the past. It looks like accepting that it happened, learning from it, and not letting it control my future. Whatever my forgiveness looks like, I added, squeezing his hand. I know you'll be there for it, even if it just means keeping them at arm's length forever. My justice isn't seeing them suffer. My justice is being free. And I was free. Every day in New York, every stroke of my paintbrush was an affirmation of that freedom. It had taken me 14 years, but I had finally found my way back to myself. And that was a masterpiece no one could ever take away. As I look back on this journey, the biggest lesson I've learned isn't about betrayal, but about self-worth. For so many years, I allowed my value to be defined by my usefulness to others. I was responsible, Clara. Dependable, Clara. I believed that the love I received was conditional, that I had to earn it through constant sacrifice. My family's lie, as cruel as it was the unexpected gift that set me free. It forced me to confront a hard truth. Love isn't supposed to hurt. A real family doesn't ask you to give up on your dreams so they can live comfortably. They lift you up, they cheer for you, and they celebrate your successes as if they were their own. They help you build your wings, not clip them. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's a necessary act of self-preservation. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who respects yourself. And when you start respecting yourself, it's amazing how the world around you starts to respect you, too. My husband, Mark, had always seen my worth, but I had to discover it for myself. My journey was about reclaiming not just my art, but my identity. Sometimes you have to completely break down your old life to build a new, more authentic one. It's like starting with a blank canvas. It can be terrifying, but it's also filled with infinite possibility. And that's okay. Rebirth often begins in the ashes. Does my story resonate with you? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your family to protect your own well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to join our community, where we share real stories of overcoming life's challenges. And remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is never, ever wrong to prioritize your own mental health and your own dreams. Thank you for listening. And remember, you deserve a life built on truth, nurtured by respect, and painted in your own most brilliant colors.